My. We fighting a good fight up in here. We fighting a good fight up in here, man. Here we are. Drop it. Drop it. Drop it. Drop it. Who you gonna call? Coon Busters. This is part two of a late night angry black men's book club. I told you I was coming back. I mean, I got a piece sometimes too. I had to take some papaya pills and so forth. We're going to be dealing with black self hatred, eugenics, pork chop feminism, racism, asymmetrical warfare, all this stuff. We're going to be going through various books. Last segment, I went through about 3 books. This time I'm gonna try to go a lot faster. I'm not gonna try to do as much, but I'm putting these things out here. So come on in, y'all. Give yourselves a few minutes. And if y'all want to take a second, I don't see nobody up in here, but that's all right. I'm gonna go upstairs and get some ice for my drink. We're gonna keep pushing this. Oh my God. If I just told y'all some of this stuff, I mean, oh my God. Mm. Let's see if I can find Tibet. Okay, come on in, yo. I see 6. See if I can find this thing on Buddhism. See, they won't tell you this stuff. Buddhism. Oh, I see, I see, I see, I see. Let me see if I can find this. Hold on 1 second. Truly. Let me see. No, I don't want that. I want. Hold on, I'm looking for this. Okay, let me see. I'm looking between pages 199 and 163. How is everybody? I'm here. I'm here. I'm here. I'm just trying to find this thing. If I can get this really strange stuff that a lot of people didn't know about. A lot of people don't know about this. I'm thinking I might throw this thing out here that's really wild. Um, because okay, okay, this is wild. This is wild as hell. I'm going to read this at some point. Okay, y'all. I got 6 people. Now, where did everybody's ass go? Okay, y'all. Let me do. I want to give it. Let me see. Let me give it like a few minutes because I told people I'd be right back. Then everybody disappeared. Okay. Let me just send my MFM to everybody. I'll be with y'all in 1 second. I did get back. I got my book set up. Everything is set up. Everything is ready to go. Um, just the biggest problem, my friends, is if you jump out and you just start doing, then the bastards ask lots of questions. I don't want to have a whole bunch of questions because it disrupts the flow of things, and people don't read the comments. So I don't know. I had like 100 people a second ago. I told them to give me like 5 minutes. Now maybe they all went to the bathroom too. Maybe we all had to pee, and some people probably had to make a bowel movement. I ain't mad at them. Let me see. And let me see if I can. I'm going to look at one other thing for you 16 people. Let me see if I can do, because I might just get something just to play with this. Polio. Okay. I got something I'm going to do up in here. Okay, 18 people, 11. Hurry up, y'all. Come on in. Somebody talk to me. Hey, I'm back. I'm back. I'm going to be doing some crazy stuff. We're going to be dealing with feminism, eugenics. I might even pick some easy stuff to get out of the way. I'm thinking of how to lead this off. I'm going to pick a couple of titles. Um, this is this really nice book here. We were talking about South Africa the other day and show you how no good I think this is it. $189. Okay. Yes, Lord. I'm going to ask for like just a couple more seconds. Yeah, they all went to the restroom. Let me grab one more thing. I'm going to get some ice and some grape juice. Give me no more than 3 minutes. I'll be right back. Hang in there, hang in there. I got some stuff. Moral conscience. I have the honor. stage with Mr. Paul McKinley, Moral Conscience. Okay, I'm back, y'all. Whew, Jesus. I had to get my grape juice and my snack on. Now, that's amazing. More people came back. Y'all must have needed a break too. Mm-hmm. Man. Okay. It's 1:03. Oh my God, I'm late. Okay, everybody. I hope you've got your notepads ready. We're going to go through a bunch of books. I hope that you are taking notes. And I don't do the whole book, but give you a flavor of the information that's out here. I've got so much stuff here, trying to think how to give it all to you, but we'll keep doing it. I might do a couple of these, but I'm weeks behind because Google shut the account. I'm sorry, YouTube. And then I went to Atlanta. The same way I need to go to Chicago to help fight against Larry. And it took away from the books. And I promised people to, thank you. This is just some bread, some cheese on it. It's not as good as the welfare cheese that you used to get from the church. I miss that. Anyway, we're going to be dealing with eugenics, racism, black self-hatred, feminism, sellout Negroes, and we're going to make some of this come together. I hope that this stuff is connecting. And I haven't eaten since the beginning of the day. So, let me see. I've got 31 here. 50 is enough, people. Okay. A government cheese was good. It was delicious. Okay. I'm going to give you guys a choice. But then again, I'm going to just do this. I'm going to eat one more piece. Please forgive me for all these interruptions. Mm. I hope you're understanding that this Satanism, this LGBTQ, this eugenics, all this stuff comes in together and repeats itself. Eventually, you'll hear something and you'll realize it's connected to something that you've heard before. Over time, you'll realize there's an organized satanic movement in the world. And for some reason, black people seem to get the worst end of the stick. So I got one more piece. The boule, the boule is only as strong as black people acquiescing to the boule being important. The minute that black people reject the boule and demand real leadership with standards outside of emotions, you're on the road to freedom. Um, when y'all ask me about other people, I don't follow anybody on any platform. I like T. West. I look sometimes, but not often. I like Professor Black Truth and Black Authority best. That's who I watch. I don't watch anything I do. It's more production than paying attention to it. So I I don't pay attention to any of the other people. If I happen to do things similar to someone else, it's merely coincidental. I don't follow any of the other people. I just do what is of interest to me. So if someone does an interview, for the most part, I don't pay attention to anybody else's interviews. It's rare. Um, I like Professor Black Truth and Black Authority. That's who I mainly watch. I don't think I pay attention to basically anybody else as much as those two. I don't watch mine. I watch Professor Black Truth or Black Authority. I ignore basically everything else. I even ignore my own stuff. So I'm just saying. I think I'm full. Get my drink. Everything that Black Authority does is good. Everything that Professor Black Truth does, all this stuff is good. I like Tariq. I can't say I watch anybody. I like anyone that's trying to wake my people up. So Jeannie is doing a great job exposing the pedophile agenda. Anyone that's doing the right thing, I support them. I don't follow anyone else. I don't try to. And I don't try to copy anyone else. I don't do that. So it's just a lot of work. There are a lot of people. We have 50, 60, 70 million people. There's room for me to talk to a few thousand and for Professor Black Truth to talk to tens and all of them. If all of us do our work, we'll get there. So that's my answer. I've only watched The Breakfast Club twice ever. I watch maybe T. West now and then. I watch a little Vicky Dillard, but I don't really. Professor Black Truth. Black authority all the way. That's who I look for every week, just them mainly. Not against anybody. I'm just telling you who gets me off, who does it to me, who's giving me intellectual booty every weekend, who's got me beat down. The other people, they're out there. I'm glad they're out there. Keep doing it. I don't watch anyone else. So you ask me, if you're getting good information, keep going. No criticism of people educating the masses. Okay, it's time to go. I'm going to get rid of this book right now. I've held this book up before. Anthony Simpson, Black and Gold. Anthony Simpson, Black and Gold. Anthony Simpson, Black and Gold. Sampson. Why am I saying Sampson? Anthony Sampson, Black and Gold. We were talking about South Africa the other night and the book Plague Wars by Mangold and Goldberg. And I focused in on South Africa. And I could do a chapter of this and get rid of this book for now. And just tell you point blank what's going on here. I'm going to go to chapter 13 of Tycoons and Revolutionaries. And when I start reading, this is a short chapter. And I may read something from Black Bourgeoisie. It's an oldie but a goodie. So let me get busy. It's 1:15. I'm already 30 minutes behind. Please pardon me. Chapter 13. Anthony Sampson's Black and Gold, Tycoons, Revolutionaries, and Apartheid. Okay, y'all. Tycoons and Revolutionaries. Here's the quote. The longer the white minority regime persists in its racist policies, the greater likelihood that Black South African mythology will become overwhelmingly anti-capitalistic and anti-Western. I'll repeat. The longer the white minority regime persists in its racist policies, the greater likelihood that Black South African mythology will become overwhelmingly anti-capitalist and anti-Western. This is by Leonard Thompson, The Political Mythology of Apartheid. Since Harry Oppenheimer had retired as chairman of the Anglo-American Corporation, quickly, Anglo-American Corporation is the most important corporation in South Africa. They basically control 66% or more of South Africa. It's dominated by one Jewish-owned corporation called Anglo-American Corporation, which was started by Cecil Rhodes, the homosexual, deviant pedophile, who you get the Rhodes Scholarship from, who said, I care for gold, not for niggers. He's the one that set up the homosexual gang raping dormitory system for the miners in South Africa. This is their Anglo-American Corporation. So I'll repeat this. Since Harry Oppenheimer, a Jewish family, retired as chairman of the Anglo-American Corporation in January 1983, there had been a constant speculation about the character of the new leadership. Few people were very interested at the choice of his successor, Gavin Relly, who came from the heart of the Anglo tradition, a former Rhodes Scholar, who had been the private secretary to both Harry and his father, Sir Ernest, before climbing the Anglo ladder. He had run its Zambian mines at the time when President Kaunda had half nationalized them, which shocked him much less than Oppenheimer, and he later ran its North American business from Toronto. He personified the Anglo style, which combined the manner of an English public school with it uh, being, as Relly put it, much tougher than one looks. He was more naturally conservative and much less politically experienced than Oppenheimer, but he was thrust into politics as a director of Anglo as the president of the South Africa Foundation. He thought that South African businessmen were more exposed to the international approval of apartheid than governments which were involved in the delicate egg dances of the diplomatic world, and he insisted that business was entitled to say what it thinks. Those politics are jeopardizing its ability to create wealth. He had his own doubts about capitalism. I am not keen on calling ours a capitalist society, he said in 1985, because I think capitalism in certain circumstances is not very free. For instance, while Nazi Germany was a capitalist society, it was never free in any proper sense. Harry Oppenheimer still had an office in the Anglo building. His only son, Nicholas, who became deputy chairman, was talked of as Relly's successor, and the family firm, E. Oppenheimer and Son, was still the largest single shareholder in Anglo. Harry still made some speeches around the world and made no secret of his political worries. With the emergency, he was totally disillusioned with both his promises to businessmen. This was a racist South African President P.W. Botha. Gavin Relly commissioned an immense...
Just back up on YouTube. So, YouTube, I like that. And I'm going to put this up.
Sorry. Let's shut down. Gavin Relly commissioned an immense volume weighing 16 pounds full of flattering tributes to Oppenheimer and the corporation. But he made it clear that he would not necessarily follow in his predecessor's footsteps. I don't intend to have to fill his boots. I intend to fill my own. He was less subtle and reflective than Oppenheimer. He had the bluff, outdoor style of many Anglo executives. He held forth articulately, looking over his spectacles. He enjoyed robust argument and giving interviews, using phrases like, I would judge that. But he never had Oppenheimer's intellectual curiosity, a love of listening, and did not pretend to. He was not deeply informed about black politics, and he had never taken the ANC very seriously. It was all the more astonishing then, soon after the declaration of the emergency. Listen to this. He agreed to join a small group to fly up to Zambia to talk to Oliver Tambo. Oliver Tambo is one of the leaders of the ANC. Relly had a more awesome responsibility than the bankers. A huge industrial company could not simply cut its losses and pull out, as the bankers had done. It had a massive stake in the country's future, whatever its government. And Anglo now dominated the South economy more than ever. One survey compiled in 1985, fiercely disputed by Anglo, showed that it controlled directly or indirectly 54.2% of the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, which is also said to represent 26% of South Africa's wealth. 4 times as much as its nearest contenders, Sanlam and SA Mutual. We are living in a country controlled by cartels and lobbyists, wrote Robin McGregor, the author and publisher of the Investor's Handbook. And the government only too keen to satisfy the lobbyists at the expense of 25 million people. To many black radicals, Anglo seemed to come close to Lenin's picture of monopoly capitalism. As Relly was fully aware, would it not be better, I asked him, if it were broken up? But where would you start, he replied. We've got 250,000 shareholders. We don't deal in price-fixing businesses. Gold doesn't rape the public. Our companies are very separate. The government knows that they would fiddle with Anglo at their peril because there'd be no logic for preventing other fiddling. But Relly was aware that Anglo and the other major corporations would have to be fundamentally changed to make them acceptable to any black or partially black government. I don't stand by rigid paternalistic capitalism. We need to change the process of shareholding, but free enterprise should mean above all a freedom of choice. The economic strength of Anglo was not easily translated into political power, and its semi-monopoly was a source of weakness as much as strength. It was always acutely vulnerable to Pretoria, whether through government contracts or broader political leverage, and it was reluctant to interfere with the autonomy of its hundreds of subsidiaries for fear of being accused of monopoly. A tragic example was its attitude to the country's most liberal newspaper, the Rand Daily Mail, which controlled indirectly through a newspaper group, SAN. The Mail had a large black readership in Soweto, so that it formed, as Gavin Relly himself put it, a bridge between black and white thinking, and Relly was personally concerned that white South Africans would get into a position where, for lack of nitty-gritty investigation or comment by the press, we may come to be deluded as the real nature of our society and how it was developing. But the Mail was not popular with most businessmen or advertisers, who preferred the conventional Johannesburg Star, the traditional spokesman for the Chamber of Mines. By the 80s, the Mail was losing several $1 million a year, and SAN wanted to close down. The journalists appealed to Oppenheimer and Relly, but in vain. On April 30th, 1985, stopped publication, to be replaced the next day by Business Day, which was proclaimed as the national newspaper for decision makers and which had few black readers. To knock down the Mail's bridge, just when the country was becoming rapidly polarized and businessmen were looking anxiously for contacts with blacks, raised more serious doubts as to whether South African businessmen were really acting in their own interests. But as the wave of violence moved into the emergency, Relly was becoming more aware of the long-term dangers of Anglo-Americans' identification with Pretoria, and though he dreaded the African quagmire he had seen in Zambia, a peaceful transition to African rule, already before the emergency, there had been tentative moves to make contact with the ANC in exile from several businessmen, who included Ian Sims, the New Zealander who ran British Petroleum in Cape Town, and Chris Ball, the chief executive of Barclays Bank in Johannesburg. The most determined and open was Tony Bloom, the debonair young Harvard-trained lawyer who had taken over from his father as the fourth generation of his family to become chairman of the Premier Group in 1979. Premier's, bakeries, stores, and factories were increasingly dependent on black custom and thus concerned with their political image, but Bloom was also personally an intellectual and one of the most courageous of the business leaders. Others outside business were also pressing for contacts with the ANC, including Hugh Murray, the entrepreneurial editor of the Leadership magazine, who had struck up a warm relationship with President Kaunda of Zambia and believed that the ANC is a reality that South Africans will have to come to grips with sooner or later. And Harold Parkensdorff, the adventurous young editor of the Afrikaner daily Vaderland, or Fatherland, who had decided that it is only the ANC which at the end of the day can be said to have a truly national following, if not for its methods, at least for its ideas. Parkendorf insisted that South Africa must grasp the nettle of the ANC, full well knowing it may be dangerous, but not as dangerous as not doing it. The South African Foundation, which was now much more independent from Pretoria, was favoring contact with the ANC, and in January 1985, its man in London, David Willers had already met two officials from the ANC in London, Sally Smith and Saritsi Choabe. Willis assured them that the South African businessmen were now committed to fundamental reforms for reasons of self-interest and preferred the ANC be legalized. The foundation would like to exchange views with the ANC to find common ground. They were anxious to try to avoid becoming a sabotage project of the ANC. Solly Smith said the ANC would be glad to have talks with anyone provided that they were not formal negotiations, and warned that if the ANC were to be undermined by more radical elements, the task of reconstruction would become much more difficult. The revival and the reputation of the African National Congress had taken nearly all whites by surprise. It was still officially banned and unquoted by the press, and most of its leaders had been in jail for 22 years. But Mandela had never been so famous. The power of the ANC, with their fragile organization, confronted all of Pretoria's military machine, seemed as mysterious as that of Ayatollah Khomeini before the Iranian Revolution, and in some ways more baffling, for it had no strong religious backing, no network of mullah and mosque, but it still represented the long tradition of black protest, martyrdom, and freedom to which the young rebels now rallied. Many younger white businessmen were now seriously wondering whether they might be dealing with an ANC government in their lifetime. Within the Republic, wrote a historian of black politics, Tom Lodge, quote, the conviction that the ANC constitutes the only viable alternative and successor to the incumbent administration is one that is beginning to affect not just the political responses of black people, but those of whites as well. In Lusaka, Oliver Tambo was still looking for international economic pressure to avert the need for greater violence, and he believed the businessmen could do far more to influence the Pretoria government. He was supported by his more left-wing colleagues, including the white, and I need to say Jewish communist, Joe Slavo. And he took care to keep in touch with his contacts inside South Africa to explain to them why he was talking to capitalists. By early August, the group of South African business leaders had agreed to take bold steps to fly up to Lusaka. Originally, they were to have included not only Gavin Riley and Tony Bloom, but Chris Ball of Barclays, Mike Rochalt, the chairman of the conglomerate Barlow Rand, and two influential Afrikaners, Anton Rupert of the Rembrandt Tobacco Group and Fred Du Plessis of Sanlam. But the first meeting on August 28th had to be postponed. Then Ball had to attend the strategy meeting, and Rochalt explained that he had to go to his son's wedding. And when the plans were leaked, Du Plessis and Rupert dropped out, fearing anger from the president. But Botha did not try to stop the visit. He was cross, but not very cross, said Relly. The foreign ministry in Pretoria even gave the businessmen's party a very superficial 3-page briefing about the ANC. On September 13, a little party flew up in an Anglo plane to Zambia. The businessmen Relly and Bloom, augmented at the last moment by Zach De Beer, the former progressive member of parliament who is now the director of Anglo, together with two newspaper editors, Packendorf and Tertius Myburg of the Johannesburg Sunday Times. But Relly was by far the most significant as head of the dominant corporations, and he had agreed against the opinion of Oppenheimer, who did not conceal that he felt twitchy about the excursion. They met at the Presidential Hunting Lodge of Mafue, the game park in Zimbabwe, where Kaunda received them and brought them together with a team from the ANC. Oliver Tambo as president, and the young director of information, Thabo Mbeki, whose father Govan was still in prison with Mandela, and Indian Mark Maharaj, who had been on Robben Island, and Chris Haney. The blacks wore ties and neat suits while the whites looked unkempt with open necks. If you had been asked to say which were the businessmen and which were revolutionaries, some said of one of the whites, you would have got it wrong, the wrong way around. Kaunda spoke briefly, pointing out that they were all South Africans. He offered to leave them together and was pressed to stay. Tambo insisted that they should not sit in two phalanxes facing each other like opposing camps, but should be distributed around the room. He called Gavin Reddy and asked to be called Oliver. The atmosphere, everyone agreed, was soon extraordinarily friendly. It was one of the nicest days I've ever spent, Relly said afterwards. A picnic among South Africans talking about their future together. A more attractive and genial group would have been hard to imagine, said Bloom. It was a marvelous meeting, said Tambo. They talked for 6 hours, continuing through lunch, where Tambo said grace and White's astonishment about the problems of violence, reconstruction, nationalization, the country's economic future. Bloom was struck by the black sense of patriotism after years of exile. They loved to talk about the places and the people in the Republic. They also thought that they were highly intelligent leaders, streets ahead of most black leaders inside South Africa, with whom there could be serious negotiations and compromise. He remained worried about the communist component of the ANC's link with the South African Communist Party, but he was struck at the lack of Marxist dogma. Sweden seemed to be their model rather than Eastern Europe or Russia. The businessmen predictably asked about the threat of nationalization, which was implicit in the ANC's Freedom Charter 30 years earlier. Tambo insisted that some of the major corporations would have to be taken under state control. They represent a tremendous wealth in the midst of unspeakable poverty. He also asked the businessmen to stop supporting the state arms corporation, Armscor, and warned that the ANC would attack economic installations, but he adopted a very conciliatory approach and talked about a future mixed economy in South Africa. When asked about violence, Tambo said he personally abhorred it. I even take insects out of the bath. But he said, Thabo Mbeki explained, that the intensification of the military struggle would inevitably mean that more civilians would die, though the ANC would not deliberately attack them. But Tambo insisted later that he had left them with no doubt that he would be compelled to allow violence in the future. The whites left the room in a mood of some euphoria. Bloom believed it was a breakthrough and hoped for follow-up. Hugh Murray insisted that there was considerable justification for further talks. Gavin Relly was really moved by the goodwill. There are some important areas with which one should be able to find fundamental agreement, starting with the recognition that we are all South Africans, he said in London soon afterwards. All of us in that meeting want to see a new coherent society in South Africa based on demonstrable justice and court-monitored Bill of Rights. And he later explained, predictably, there were some great gaps between us. Businessmen did not embrace the prospects of nationalization, either in a practical or philosophical terms. They know, as a matter of fact, that economic thinking, which derives from the shadowy, incompetent world of worn-out Marxism, does not create wealth. On the other hand, who can deny that there are inequities in the generation and distribution of South Africa's wealth? And a new society, reformed or revolutionary, would have to apply itself more diligently to the alleviation of deprivation, education, health, and feeding. The ANC still broadcast bloodthirsty threats against whites. On October 7th, Radio Freedom from Addis Ababa, we must attack them at their homes and holiday resorts, just as we have been attacking black bootlickers at their homes. This must happen to their white colleagues. But Tambo soon afterwards explained in the broadcast on October 15th that the business leaders could be an additional lever in the ANC struggle, even if they were motivated by their own self-interest. If they reach the conclusion that indeed the whole apartheid system is going to destroy their businesses, even the whole economy, at that point they will want to remove the apartheid system and will even join forces which are set to destroy the system, provided that they are sure that the system will not be replaced with something worse for the economy, for their pockets, for their profits. This is almost done. Tambo was ready to talk with the international businessmen, all the more after his encounters in New York the previous March in October 1985. He was invited by a group of friends to visit London, not just to talk about the anti-apartheid movement and the Labour Party, the traditional allies of the ANC, but to meet businessmen, bankers, and other politicians. In the first part of his London visit, Tambo briefly overlapped with Bishop Tutu, and the Commonwealth Secretary Sonny Ramphal gave a dinner for both at the resplendent Commonwealth headquarters at Marlborough House, underneath the frescoes of the Duke of Marlborough's 18th century victories. It was attended by the Commonwealth diplomats, businessmen, churchmen, including Bishop Trevor Hudson, who had been both the mentor of both guests of honor, but it was boycotted by the British government. Tambo talked warmly about his meeting with the businessmen in Lusaka, where they all were South Africans together, but he warned of much harsher confrontations with the apartheid government ahead. And he told the British guests, when you say that you don't want sanctions because it will hurt us most, you're not honest. You don't want to hurt your trade, which you think depends on apartheid. Later in October, in a small private gathering, Tambo met for the first time chairmen or directors of the biggest British companies investing in South Africa. Tambo began by saying that the meeting should have happened 10 or 20 years earlier, since they both should have the same concern with a peaceful South Africa. They have welcomed the concern of American and South African businessmen, but the British were especially important with their huge investments, and he asked for their help in bringing pressure on Botha. They couldn't leave it to economic progress to break down apartheid. He was confident that the ANC were winning the fight for their rights. He would not be talking to them if they were not, but there would be much more violence, even a total catastrophe, unless international interests intervened. Every reform that Pretoria had made had been the result of international pressure. Already whites, including Afrikaners, were turning against apartheid as they began to feel the pinch. They would insist on a change of government as the pressure stepped up. Sanctions would never cause an economic wasteland because the government would be changed long before that. The real wasteland would be produced if South Africa were left to itself. The businessmen were reluctant to commit themselves, and they complained about the ANC's policy of nationalizing the banks, the mines, and the land in the Freedom Charter 35 years earlier. How can you expect us to help you on behalf of our shareholders? One of the chairmen asked. If our only reward will be to be nationalized. We do business with 20 African countries, said another, often with the greatest of difficulty. We will have to be able to earn dividends. We are fed up with being told before independence, it'll be all right on the night. What guarantees can you give us? But we are not committed to any dogma, replied Tambo. We're committed to democracy, and we must wait for the people to decide what they want. Our chief concern is redistribution of our country, which has such great inequities and concentrations of wealth. Nationalization had seemed the most obvious means, but there could be others, including perhaps a version of the American Sherman Antitrust Act. He was impressed by the policies of Robert Mugabe in Zimbabwe, who, though committed to extensive nationalization, had in fact stalled it and encouraged free enterprise. Tambo asked them to make clear their total opposition to apartheid and to press the British government to a much stronger stand. I am talking to you not as a businessman, but as human beings. He was puzzled that a nation which had fought at such cost to defeat the Nazis should have reservations in defeating apartheid. You British were determined to destroy Hitler, which meant that much of Europe became a wasteland. But you destroyed him. We see the Pretoria regime as like the Nazis. The businessmen had varying views. Isn't there a constructive way, one of them asked the others, of showing that business is on the side of the blacks? But most were wary. It is harder for foreign companies to criticize the government than for South Africans, one of them told Tambo. We exert a lot of pressure behind the scenes, but we can't press too hard or they'll chuck us out. It was a worrying argument that the multinationals had to be more subservient to tyranny than local companies, and it contradicted the Americans' insistence that multinationals had a special political responsibility. But the British were under much less domestic pressure from shareholders and dared not risk offending Pretoria by appearing to consort with the enemy. They were beginning to hedge their bets, but not change sides. Tambo was disappointed, he said later, that they had shown no change of heart. But in the following days, Tambo, who had often visited London, was for the first time received in the conservative areas of the city. He gave a speech at Chatham House, dined privately with bankers and entrepreneurs, and he was welcomed by the two biggest banks, Barclays and Standard. He had tea with Tory MPs and gave evidence to the House of Commons Foreign Affairs, to whom he had explained once again the ANC's policy on violence and reasserted that only sanctions could reduce the bloodshed and that condemnation and denunciations of apartheid meant nothing to Pretoria. However, they were very concerned since the position taken by the banks, in fact, the withdrawal of loans and the refusal to grant loans or to roll them over, had demonstrated that sanctions can be effective. One of the consequences of this has been that the business community of South Africa has been moved not by appeals but by the reality of the threat of sanctions, disinvestment, to take very firm positions against the Botha regime. The British government, even junior officials, still had no contact with Botha or the ANC, but a few dissident Tory MPs headed by Hugh Dykes and Tim Rathbone formed their own Talk to Tambo group that later invited a delegation from the ANC to a forthright lunch. Why do you make it difficult for your friends by blowing up cars with landmines? Asked the Tories. Why is this the first time that the Tories have talked to us in 20 years? Asked the ANC. In South Africa, in the meantime, the first euphoria after the Lusaka meeting was soon evaporating, as Botha began to reassert his authority with the propaganda campaign against the ANC, while bombings and explosions shocked white opinion. In December, a landmine exploded near Messina, close to Zimbabwe, killing 6 whites, followed by another near Stockport, the most serious acts of terrorism for 18 months. At Anglo-American, Gavin Relly was facing recriminations. Harry Oppenheimer, still outspoken in retirement, remained twitchy about the meeting, puzzled that the atmosphere was so friendly, even though Tambo had conceded nothing, particularly over nationalization, and in November he had told the American Chamber of Commerce that businessmen should offer neither moral support nor material support for the ANC, since they want an economic system that would destroy everything that we in this room stand for. And Relly himself was beginning to backtrack. The Lusaka meeting was really much more of a watershed than any of the participants intended, he said later. I've been blamed ever since for opening the floodgates of international business to deal with the ANC. It was important to establish a relationship between the wealth-producing sector and the new African economic policy. But I did not think that we had a role to get the government and the ANC together. When more bombs and landmines exploding, Relly explained that Tambo had misled them and had not warned them about future atrocities. Even Hugh Murray, the journalist who helped organize the meeting, had second thoughts, worried about the communists in the ANC and the bloodthirsty broadcasts. He still favored more talks, but he thought that Tambo would have no real success until he stopped selling violence-related policies. The ANC is not about to seize power, no matter how hyped up it is. By the end of the year, the honeymoon was emphatically over. After more gruesome acts of terrorism which gave warning of black anger and chaos came to a close, Andrew Zondo, a schoolboy of 15, when in 1983 he was told by the court he was recruited into the ANC and in exile at 17 joined the military wing of Umkankwo. He had been appalled by tear gassing of black students by the police. From that day on, whenever I look at a policeman, I see him as an enemy. Then in May 1983, he heard news of a South African air attack on Mozambique, which persuaded him there's no chance to improve the life of blacks in South Africa except through violence. And before Christmas 1985, he decided to take his own reprisals. With the help of an accomplice, Mr. X, he planted a limpet mine with a 30-minute fuse on it in a refuge bin at a shopping center at Amanzimtoi Tutai, a seaside town near Durban, intended, he explained, to give a warning before it went off. But he could not find a free telephone, and the bomb went off, killing 5 Christmas shoppers. Zondo was caught, and Mr. X turned state witness at the trial, claiming he and Zondo had been instructed by Nkonkwo and the ANC, while Tambo later disclaimed knowledge, insisting the ANC strategy did not call for attacks and supermarkets, schools, or cinemas. But the Amanzimtoti deaths just before Christmas caused a wave of white indignation. The father of a child killed at Amanzimtoti, Kenny Schmidt, urged the government to begin talking to the ANC about peaceful coexistence. But the killings effectively sabotaged further business talks with the ANC over the following months. At a press conference in New Year's, which the South Africans were given special permission to quote, Tambo warned that civilian casualties were unavoidable and escalating warfare, and promised the ANC would organize mass units drawn from local populations, while he asked business leaders to stop supporting the state's arms corporation, Armscor. But most businessmen were now in no good mood to listen. Ken Owen of Business Day in Johannesburg now said that the gap between the ANC and South African government was simply too wide to be bridgeable. The Star said that Tambo has done incalculable harm to the real reform of South Africa. It was back to the classic deadlock. Relly and most business colleagues insisted that the continuing violence prevented the future talks, while the ANC insisted that without violence, no one would talk. It was because of the violence, Tambo said, that Relly came to Lusaka. The political pressures were now pulling both sides further apart. As extremists thrived on the confrontation, the ANC dreaded the emergence of a military state, while the businessmen foresaw black anarchy ruled by a black Khmer Rouge of ruthless schoolboys. But they both faced a common nightmare, a chaotic country in which no one could do business. Are y'all with me? Let me see. I want to skip something. Now, I should do one more chapter here. I just want y'all to understand that the black South Africans, while the folks are killing them with plagues, they're trying to make friends. From the very get-go, before they even got the government, they were trying to promise the white folks they weren't going to change too much. The South Africa right now is going to blow up at some point because the people that you've been told, Mandela and Oliver Tambo, were great leaders, is not really true. And since they're great, but they compromise. Black leadership sells black people out at every turn that it can, thinking it's the smarter thing to do. I want to read some more of this. I'm just thinking. I'm going to stop here. I'm going to come back to this. I want to shift for gears for a second. The ANC sold out black South Africans. I repeat, the ANC sold out black South Africans. The sellout started before there was even a transition in power. If I read another chapter at some point, you'll see that these people agreed to leave the white supremacist economy intact and basically leave it to black folks to work it out. Some black folks got houses and jobs, but fundamentally the economy remained in the hands of whites and others, and black folks in their own country still don't have anything. We've got the same kind of leadership. Now, I was just thinking, as I'm dealing with eugenics, and that's part of eugenics, is bad leadership that makes deals against the majority of the people. I want to shift gears for 1 second because I'm still in eugenics and I still want to get to feminism and some other stuff. I'm trying to think, who do I want to do the most? I got this thing. How many of y'all, I'm going to do something about COVID. I'm going to put this book up right now. I'm going to read a chapter of it. Oh, y'all gonna like this. You're going to love this. You got to read this whole book. If you don't want to read, they have it. If you've got an Amazon account. Okay, yeah, you like, but this stuff is recorded. Go back and watch it. This is Dr. Mary's Monkey. I've had this book out here for some time. I want to read a chapter. Since we're all talking about vaccinations and shots, I'm going to read some shocking stuff to y'all. I need to just do this. And I'm still going to get to the feminists and the racists and the eugenics. And if I don't do it, I'll do some today, some tomorrow, some Monday. I've got about, I want to get rid of about 10, 12 books in here. This is chapter 9 from Dr. Mary's Monkey. The treatise. In the Playboy interview we reviewed earlier, Jim Garrison referred to a medical treatise written by David Ferry. He's a pedophile failed priest who worked with Oswald, who helped kill Kennedy. David Ferry on the subject of inducing cancer virally. The U.S. government had people learning how to spread cancer. Okay? Finding the document was a high priority for me since it would go a long way towards verifying Garrison's claim about Ferry's cancer research, establishing Ferry's capability to induce cancer. On the other side of the issue, what did the American medical establishment really know about cancer at the time? How did the theories and techniques in David Ferry's medical treatise relate to the leading edge of cancer research in America? Over the years, I'd asked many people if they knew anything about the treatise and got nowhere. I had begun to question whether it even existed. Then I got a phone call from Jim DiEugenio, the author of Destiny Betrayed, JFK, Cuba, and the Garrison Case, and the chairman of a group published JFK assassination authorities called Citizens for Truth about the Kennedy assassination, saying that one of the researchers pouring through recently released JFK assassination materials in Washington, D.C., had found it. He sent me the document. These pages have been photocopied down several generations, are barely legible in places. They are reproduced as a document on page 437. Here's a brief description of the contents. Jim Garrison's memo describing David Ferry's unintentional Xerox personal notations, A description of viral cancer experiment which transferred cancer tumors from animal to animal, a discussion of the work of a doctor who developed an experimental antibiotic for treating cancer, a chart showing different types of cancers and their tissue origin, the first page of the bibliography, the second page of the bibliography. At the top, each photocopy page we found reproduced at the National Archives collection HSCA RG 233. Garrison's successor, D.A. Harry Connick, gave this document to the U.S. House of Representatives Select Committee on Assassinations in 1972, and it has been in the National Archives in Washington ever since. The U.S. government released the treatise thanks to the JFK Records Act on October 22, 1993, near a year after I started looking for it. The first point is that this is a real document. Garrison was not making up a story about a treatise in the middle of the interview, as some people had suggested to me. Secondly, we proceeded with the understanding that this document was found in Ferry's apartment by investigators from the New Orleans District Attorney's Office. What we find upon close examination is not a complete document, but fragments of a larger document. References to Chapter 9 of the document clearly indicates the original document had at least 9 chapters. The subject of the document is cancer research. The author appears to have compiled a state-of-art review of both research and literature concerning viral theories of cancer from 1900 to 1955. By simplifying the bibliography, we can see the time frame and the subject matter clearly. 1901, Parasitic Theories of Cancer, Pasteur Institute. 1911, Transmission of Malignancy Through Cell-Free Filtrate. 1930, Metabolism of Tumors. 1940, Breast Cancer in Mice as influenced by nursing. 1944, Electron Microscopy, Study of Chicken Tumor Cells. 1948, Microscope Findings of Malignant Tissue. 1949, Virus-like Bodies in Human Breast Cancer. 1949, Induction of Breast Cancer in Mice. 1950, Virus as Cause of Human and Animal Malignancy. 1951, Virus as the Cause of Cancer. 1953, Is Leukemia Caused by a Transmissible Virus? 1955, Pathogenesis of Cancer. If we reverse engineer this title, it would be something like the case for viral theory of cancer. A review of the research and literature from 1901 to 1955. It should be emphasized that the authors obviously believed that cancer was viral. Suffice it to say, it was with Gregory's work, so here the Koch postulate seems fulfilled. Cancer seems caused by a virus. So what are the contents of the original document? What did the author know about the viral nature of cancer and of related research that was being conducted across the country? The short answer is as much as any person in the world. For starters, the author knew how to prepare cell-free extracts from cancerous tumors and use those extracts to transfer cancer from animal to animal. Extracts were made from malignant tumors which appeared in the test group. These extracts were then injected into other animals of the test group. A variety of malignancies appeared: leukemia, choroepithelioma, that's a cancer of the uterus, and the author used chemical carcinogens to induce cancer. It was noted that the test that the application of carcinogens does not always produce malignancy. Hence, Cowdrey's final common path seems at work. Thus, the term carcinogen has reservations. It is to be noted that the methylchlorothianine failed to give a 100% result. Of course, it could be argued that there's been a conflict of the two items were used in the carcinogenesis. Damn, that's so long. Carcinogenesis. When you read, your tongue gets tired. Sorry. The author reviewed his or her experience with a number of experimental anti-cancer drugs. Mirastopirin, amio inoperant. Whew, I'm gonna skip these. And the last one, magnesium trisinate. The last of these, she explained how to prepare from scratch, following process for manufacturing this. I'm gonna skip this. Okay, wow, I want to get to this. All right. Who wrote this document? When was it written? Where was it written and why? Simply stated, David Ferry didn't write this document, other than Garrison's note, which called the document Ferry's article on cancer. There's no evidence that Ferry is the author. We do not have a title page, and the author refers to him or herself in the third person. A careful reading provides numerous clues about the author. The most obvious one is that the author had daily access to X-ray machines and other professional laboratory supplies and equipment. Consider, I'm going to skip that. Let me skip. I may want to skip this. Okay, let me skip this because it's too long. I'm sorry, I'm going to skip a few pages. Today, many Americans do not remember what a terrible curse the polio epidemic was upon the land. At its crest in the early 50s, over 33,000 Americans felt crippled or died slow, terrible deaths from polio each year. Most were children. The word polio struck fear in the hearts of parents across America. It was a casually transmitted virus that first infected the lining of the intestines, then the bloodstream, then finally the nervous system, where it destroyed the victim's brainstem. The difference between the crippled and the dead was determined by the extent of damage to the brainstem. The cavernous hospital ward, full of hideous-looking machines called iron lungs, awaited patients who became too weak to breathe for themselves. President Roosevelt himself was crippled by polio before entering the White House. The search for a polio vaccine became a national scientific effort, supported by the most powerful political forces in the land. The problem was this: polio was caused by a virus, not a bacteria, and viruses do not respond to antibiotics. So, despite the spectacular success of antibiotics introduced to the American clinical scene in 1942, the medical community was powerless to stop the virus from crippling and killing. A New York City lawyer close to President Roosevelt organized the March of Dimes and collected millions of dollars of coins from grade school children across the country to finance the research effort. The progress was encouraging. In the early 50s, American scientist Jonas Salk came forward with the brave new idea to eliminate all three strains of polio at once, grow the polio viruses in the lab, kill them, inject them into healthy children with dead viruses. The dead viruses would not be able to reproduce, so they would not harm the children. But their immune systems would detect the presence of the invading viruses and would rally to defend the body, producing a hefty supply of antibodies in the children antibodies in the process. Then the children's fully armed immune systems would be ready to repel any live polio virus that attacked them in the future. His trials in 1953 and 54 were successful. Optimism about Salk's vaccine reached its peak. 5 laboratories began producing vaccine from a procedure Salk designed and accumulated large enough supply for mass inoculation beginning in April 1955, touched off by an official ceremony on the 10th anniversary of Roosevelt's death that confirmed Salk's success. Results of years of research, millions of dollars of investment, and the fate of thousands of crippled children were ready for the most publicized anticipated event in the history of medicine. In the 11th hour, a bacteriologist at NIH was told to safely test the new polio vaccine. Her name was Bernice Eddy, MD, PhD. When she injected polio vaccine into her monkeys, they felt paralyzed in their cages. Eddy realized that the virus vaccine was not dead as promised, but still alive and ready to breed. It was time to sound the alarm. She sent pictures of the paralyzed monkeys to the to the NIH management and warned them of the upcoming tragedy. A debate erupted in the corridors of power. Was the polio vaccine really ready? Should mass inoculation proceed on schedule? We're dealing with this right now, y'all. Somebody blew a whistle. This is in 1955. 1955. 61 years ago. I'm sorry, 66 years ago. We've been here before. I'm just telling y'all, I'm reading. A handful of prominent doctors across the country stepped into the fray to throw their weight of the reputation on the side of the vaccine. Just like right now. One of the doctors was Mary Sherman's boss, Dr. Alton Ochsner. To demonstrate his conviction that the vaccine was really ready, he inoculated his own grandchildren with it. Mass inoculations proceeded on schedule. Within days, children fell sick from polio. Let me read that again. Within days, children fell sick from polio. Some were crippled, some died. Estimates vary dramatically. Ochsner's grandson died. His granddaughter contracted polio but survived. An enormous lawsuit erupted. Heads rolled everywhere. The Secretary of Health, Education, and Welfare, Oveta Hobby, stepped down. The director of the National Institute of Health, Dr. William Sibrel, resigned. It was the biggest fiasco in medical history. Who wants a piece of that history right now? Go ahead. Zach, you chumps. Take it. Go ahead. Be my guest. Use it. And it's not FDA approved. And notice they could sue. Lawsuits. No suits for this stuff now. Moderna, Pfizer, your ass is on your own. No lawyer, no one's going to help you. You're just backed up. Go ahead. A second, safer vaccine developed by Albert Sabin was deployed. It used a weakened live virus instead of a dead virus. It worked. Polio was history. The future was safe, or so it seemed. In the aftermath of the debacle, Bernice Eddy was taken off polio research and transferred to the influenza section by the thankless NIH establishment. This is why doctors and people are lying. They don't want to be destroyed professionally to tell y'all the truth about this bullshit. Go ahead, be fools. Be arrogant, stupid, dumb fuck niggas who don't like facts and information. Don't want history, don't want to deal with any of that. Be my guest. Ignore it. It's not, shoot. Crack rock. You mean pookie or pussy. Hold on, wait a second. She shared her frustration with a small group of women scientists who ate brown bag lunches on the steps of one of the laboratories. There, Eddy met a tenacious scientist by the name of Sarah Stewart, MD, PhD, who was waging her own battle against the official paradigms of the bureaucratic medicine. Bernice Eddy and Sarah Stewart became both close friends. Sarah Stewart's name remains virtually unknown today despite her huge contribution to modern medicine. Not only did she prove that some cancers were caused by viruses, but subsequent research on the virus she discovered led to the discovery of DNA recombination, which is one of the most powerful tools in medical research today. Go women. Raised in the fertile Rio Grande Valley on the Mexican border, Stewart's educational odyssey ranged from the New Mexico Agricultural College in 1927 to a PhD in bacteriology from the University of Chicago in 1939. Next, Stewart went to work for the National Institutes of Health as a bacteriologist for 5 years, believing that having a PhD instead of an MD was holding her back her career advancement. She entered Georgetown Medical School and earned her MD in 1947. Then she joined the National Cancer Institute and stayed there until resigned to the U.S. Public Health Service in 1960. From the beginning, Sarah Stewart promoted the idea that cancer was caused by viruses. Due to this, she was not accepted by the NIH or NCI staffs, who described her as an eccentric lady. So smart people that know what they talk about, whether they're talking about hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, brilliant people, if the money and the numbers on the side of some bullshit medical practice, they don't mind destroying both doctors and people who really want to help and letting other people get destroyed. Doctors are really that ruthless, selfish, and narcissistic. Okay, they're described as a narcissistic lady determined to prove her theory was right. No one believed her. Finally, she was given access to an NCI laboratory in Bethesda where she could try to prove her theories. In 1953, she almost succeeded, but her work was not accepted by the ruling crowd at NIH. They found her methods sloppy and objected to the fact that she did not culture her viruses. In 1956, her lunch partner, Bernice Eddy, showed Sarah how to grow her viruses in a culture of mouse cells. She now had all the ingredients she needed and began a series of experiments which are called classic by modern-day NIH researchers. As her work progressed, she realized that she stood on the stage of an extremely important discovery and became very protective of her techniques. In staff presentations, she would bewilder NIH pathologists by showing them slides of things they'd never seen before. When they asked her how she produced her results, she would giggle and say, "It's a secret." To quote her supervisor, Alan Rabson, she drove everyone crazy. One of her procedural abnormalities was that she never did control groups, saying, "They'll only confuse you." In 1957, Stewart and Eddy discovered the polyoma virus, which produced several types of cancer in a variety of small animals. Polyoma proved that some of her cancers were indeed caused by viruses. Her discovery officially threw open the doors of cancer virology, as Rabson phrased it. Suddenly, the whole place just exploded after Sarah found polyoma. It was the beginning of a new era of hope, but raised some dark questions about earlier deeds. Before long, Yale's laboratory discovered that the polyoma virus that had produced cancer and Stewart's mice and hamsters turned out to act like the simian virus 40, a monkey virus that caused cancer. In June 1959, Bernice Eddy, who was still officially assigned to the flu vaccine project, began thinking about the polio vaccine again. This time, she was worried about something much deeper than polio. The vaccine's manufacturers had grown their polio viruses in the kidneys of monkeys. Let me stop for a second. The Moderna and Pfizer vaccines use cells from dog kidneys. I'm just telling you. I'm just telling you. And when they removed the polio viruses from the monkey's kidneys, they also removed an unknown number of other monkey viruses. The more they looked, the more they found. The medical science of the day knew little about the behavior or consequences of these monkey viruses. But times were changing. Confronted with mounting evidence that some monkey viruses cause cancer, Eddy grew suspicious of the polio vaccine and asked an excruciating question. Had they inoculated an entire generation of Americans with cancer-causing monkey viruses? She conducted her research quietly without alerting her NIH supervisors. In October 1960, 1 month before the Kennedy-Nixon presidential debate, Eddy gave a talk at the New York Cancer Society without warning the NIH in advance and announced that she had examined monkey kidney cells in which the polio virus was grown and had found that they were infected with cancer causing viruses. Her implication was clear. There were cancer causing monkey viruses in the polio vaccine. I want to let you know my father and mother, born a year apart, both developed cancer about the same time, were vaccinated against polio about the same time, got cancer in the same year. Just saying. This was tantamount to forecasting an epidemic of cancer in America. When the word got back to the NIH bosses, they exploded. No suggestion of cancer causing monkey viruses in the polio vaccine was welcomed at the NIH. When the cussing stopped, they crushed Bernice Eddy professionally. They took away her lab, destroyed her animals, put her under a gag order, and prevented her from attending professional meetings, and delayed publication of her scientific papers. In the words of Edward Shorter, the author of The Health Century, her treatment became a scandal within the scientific community. Later, it became subject to congressional inquiry. In the words of Dr. Lawrence Kilham, a fellow at NIH researcher who wrote a letter of protest to the U.S. Surgeon General's office, the presence of cancer virus in the polio virus vaccine is a matter demanding full investigation. And further, Dr. Eddy's case to many of us represents a somewhat Prussian-like attempt to hinder an outstanding scientist. Eddy, however, was not the only one who'd investigated the issue. A viral specialist named Lorella McClellan, working for vaccine developer Maurice Hilleman in Philadelphia, found similar problems in the polio vaccine. The essence of the problem was that SV40 did not cause cancer in its natural host, an Asian monkey. But what would it do in another primate that had never been exposed to it? One whose immune system had not been sensitized to SV40. Like Stewart and Eddy, Hillman knew the population of laboratory animals was hopelessly cross-infected with all sorts of viruses. Monkeys from different continents were frequently caged together. It would be impossible to guarantee that any monkey in the American laboratory population had not been exposed to SV40 at some time in the past. Hillman needed clean monkeys caught in the wild to avoid any last-minute contamination. He completely bypassed the commercial animal importing network. He arranged to have a group of green monkeys. Here come the green monkeys, y'all. Green monkeys caught in Africa, sent to Philadelphia via Madrid, an airport which normally did not handle any animal traffic. His own drivers picked up the clean monkeys at the Philadelphia airport and brought them straight to his lab. When he injected these with SV40, these clean African green monkeys developed cancer. Hilleman announced these findings in a medical conference in Copenhagen, but it was not news to the NIH staffers in the audience. The insiders already knew that there was a cancer-causing virus in the polio vaccine, but they had not announced it. It was the public that did not know. Should the public have been told? It was difficult for us to have seen the enormous press coverage of AIDS to understand the indolent response of the 1960s press on this subject. Was it really their job to prevent public panic? Did they cower in the face of scientific authority? Were they lazy or stupid or arrogant? Or were they told not to run the story by political forces? It is hard to say, but there's evidence that the word leaked out anyway. In the spring of 1961, one of Eddy's co-workers published a medical article which said there were live SV40 in the polio vaccine. Eddy herself confirmed that SV40 monkey virus was causing cancer in hamsters as well as monkeys, proving that it was capable of crossing the species barrier, but she was not allowed to release the information until a year later. NIH notified the U.S. Surgeon General that a future polio vaccine would be free of SV40. On July 26, 1961, the New York Times reported two vaccine manufacturers were withdrawing their polio vaccines until they could eliminate a monkey virus. The article ran on page 33 with no mention of cancer. 7 months later, a second article in the New York Times mentioned the possibility of cancer and the polio vaccine. This article ran on page 27. There, the story died, and the specter of an approaching epidemic of cancer silently rose on the horizon. On the heels of the polio fiasco, the medical hierarchy feared the judgment of the masses. Their ability to destroy a painstakingly constructed scientific career overnight had been clearly proved. Another spate of bad news might shatter the public's confidence in vaccines altogether. Where would the world be then? Where would the public health establishment be then? As SV40 discoverer Maurice Hillman put it, the government kept the contamination of the polio vaccine secret to avoid public hysteria. We are reminded of the scene in Frankenstein when a crowd of superstitious villagers gather at the castle gate, angrily waving their pitchforks and torches in the air, demanding to know what evil was going on inside the doctor's laboratory. To quote the words of polio vaccine developer Albert Sabin, I think the release of certain information prematurely is not a public service. There's too much scaring of the public unnecessarily. Oh, your children were injected with a cancer virus and all that. That's not very good. Hi, Ose from England. Prematurely? Hadn't the mass inoculation already taken place? Hadn't several top scientists using carefully controlled experiments established that the problem was real? Hadn't they announced results to their professional peers? Unnecessarily? Wasn't there still time to try to do something about it? Shouldn't someone at least try? Sabin might as well have said, I prefer my tombstone to read, the vanquisher of polio and not the father of the great cancer epidemic. His attempt to hide behind the apron of public service is no more than an attempt to avoid both the responsibility and the unpleasant experience of facing the angry public. I'm sure we would all prefer not to be held accountable for our blunders. The more important question, was Eddie's prediction of a cancer epidemic accurate? Did the epidemic ever happen? If it did, wouldn't it show up in cancer statistics? Wouldn't the great wizards of medicine tell us if there was really an epidemic? Wouldn't the press jump all over it, given the times I decided to check the numbers myself? A real epidemic would be easy to spot due to its size, so I dug out the cancer statistics published by the National Cancer Institute in 1989 and started reading the literature. Two things became clear. One, we're losing the war to cancer. Two, we're in the midst of an ongoing cancer epidemic, despite improvements in cancer treatment, which decreased the age-adjusted per capita death rate slightly. The hard fact remains Americans were getting cancer faster than ever. Reporting on a 1994 article published in the Journal of the American Medical Association, the front page of the USA Today stated, baby boomers are much more likely to get cancer than their grandparents at the same age. And further, men born between 1948 and 57 had 3 times as much cancer not related to smoking as men born in the late 1800s. Why? Per USA Today, studies researchers insist that the increase cannot be fully explained by smoking, better diagnosis, or aging population. The words of the U.S. Public Health Service official Deverly Davis, there's something else going on. I'm not a biostatistician, but John Baylor III was when he worked for the National Cancer Institute. When he told these sad facts to Congress in 1991, NCI's response was absolute rage. His subsequent tenure there was brief. That something else was going on may help to explain why the summary cancer data that we have available to us ends in 1988. Despite $22 billion spent on research during the 21-year war on cancer, with little progress has been made in the prevention in some areas and has gotten dramatically worse. The bottom line for the cancer establishment was that the National Cancer Institute's initial lofty goal of a 50% reduction in the cancer rate by the end of the century had to be abandoned. The war may have stimulated additional billions of dollars in funding in its day, but well before the end of the century it became indefensible. And reality is that 1988 saw a 20% increase in cancers versus 1973. But it is true that with most averages, 20% increase doesn't tell the whole story. The vast majority of cancers remain relatively stable versus 1973. The 20% increase is a result of five cancers which increased dramatically: lung, breast, prostate, lymphoma, melanoma of the skin. The rest of the cancers did not increase significantly in the same period. Remember the dreaded polio epidemic with its 33,000 cases of polio per year. Compare that with the numbers from 1994. 182,000 new cases of breast cancer diagnosed, 200,000 new cases of prostate cancer diagnosed, 500,000 new cases of lung cancer diagnosed, an increase in any of these diseases since the years of 1985 is greater than the entire polio epidemic at its peak. Since 1985, yes, 1955 plus 30 years is 1985. A 10-year-old who received a vaccine in 1955 turned 40 in 1985. A graph entitled "The Cancer Epidemic" shows the situation clearly. It depicts a percentage of increase in incident rates compared to the base year of 1973. The National Cancer Institute age adjusted the numbers to keep the aging baby boomer age wave from inflating the picture. The first thing you notice is what didn't happen. If you look at all the sites combined, 1988 shows a 0% increase over 1973. This includes leukemia, Hodgkin's disease, and cancer of the brain, colon, bladder, rectum, larynx, pancreas, kidney, stomach, ovary, testes, cervix, uterus, thyroid, esophagus, and liver. For some reason, bone cancers are not mentioned. Next is the lung cancer line. Lung cancer statistics were terrible for both men and women. Both sexes showed long, steady increases in both incidence rates and mortality rates over 16 years from 1973 to 1988. This upward trend had been consistent ever since it began in the 1920s, when lung cancer was a virtually non-existent disease. The general consensus had been that dramatic but consistent rise in lung cancer is a result of cigarette smoking. So we were isolated from our search for Eddie's epidemic of viral cancer, but it is sobering to think that the 500,000 annual cases of this one disease consume $50 billion of our medical insurance premiums each year. That's twice as much money as was spent on the war on cancer over these 20 years. If you're like most of us and have a problem thinking in the billions, try this. In the United States alone, we're spending $137 million every day on the treatment of one disease. On the four soft tissue cancers show cancers that average a 50% increase over the 16-year period. These four show dramatic increases in their incidence rates versus 1970. Skin cancer, lymphoma, prostate, breast. We should note that there's no accepted explanation for what caused this. Each of the four tissue soft tissue cancer showed a dramatic increase its incidence rate at the same time. This is not what we would expect to find following a mass inoculation with the virus which caused multiple types of cancers. This would be my candidate for Eddie's epidemic. All the cancers, none receives more press than breast cancer. Talk shows and soft news, TV features share the common burden like a giant group therapy session. Science magazine, which is hardly sensational, said breast cancer statistics are alarming. Publicly, professionals expressed bewilderment over the breast cancer statistics. The explanation is they did offer were feeble. Most commonly heard is early detection. Early detection helps treatment and the death rate, but it does not significantly affect the incidence rate. All early detection does to the incidence rate is to borrow a fraction of the cases from the next year or two. It lowers next year's incidence rate unless it borrows from the following years with such early detection. In other words, it has no long-term effect. Breast cancer grows incidence grow. I'm sorry, shows the incidence of breast cancer per 100,000 women from 1987. There was a huge and sudden increase in breast cancer rate around 1985. Remember, 10-year-old girls who received the vaccine in 1955 became 40-year-old women in 1985, the age when breast cancer starts showing up in significant numbers. If the contamination of the polio vaccine was going to produce a wave of breast cancer, 1985 would be the logical year for it to show up. It is coincidental that 1985 just happened to be the year that my 40-year-old sister got breast cancer, when there's no history of breast cancer in our family. The 10-year period in the graph reveals a 30% increase in the rate of breast cancer. What this works out is breast cancer in American women grew from 130,000 cases per year to over 180,000 cases per year. Is the sudden appearance of 50,000 additional cases of breast cancer per year an epidemic? Polio was considered a major epidemic with only 33,000 cases per year. Why was breast cancer not considered an epidemic at 180,000 cases per year? These breast cancer numbers alone eclipse the polio numbers of the 1950s. Then add 200,000 cases of prostate cancer, then add lymphoma, then add skin cancer. We should ask ourselves the obvious questions. Why have we not heard more about the enormous epidemic in soft tissue cancers? Could it be because the billions of dollars which the U.S. government gave to the National Cancer Institute and the NIH failed to produce a solution in time? Despite the fact that the viral nature of several cancers has been proven by government scientists nearly 40 years earlier, the 1994 edition of American Cancer Society's publication Cancer Facts and Figures didn't mention viruses among the possible causes for the most alarming increase of cancer ever recorded. Why? Today, however, there's abundant evidence of a variety of simian viruses found in the human blood supply. Of particular concern is the DNA from the SV40, often reported extracted from several types of tumors, included brain, bone, and previously rare chest cancers. In the words of former FDA virologist John Martin, MD, PhD, SV40 infection is now widespread within the human population, almost certainly as a result of the polio vaccine. Does almost certainly imply some conditionality of a careful reader might object to? Does former FDA virologist create even the tiniest crack in the seamless credibility? Am I forcing the point? Is this for real? Did dozens of monkey viruses get into the human blood supply from the polio vaccine? Did they contaminate both the Salk and Sabin vaccines? Were these same vaccines given to millions of children both in the United States and Europe? Considering this 1997 quote from the U.S. government to the National Cancer Institute. In the 1950s, SV40 was it was one of the several dozen viruses that contaminated the original Salk and Sabin polio vaccines administered to millions of school children in the United States and Europe. The vaccine contaminated with SV40 was injected into trusting children until 1963. 41 years later, an in-depth investigation by journalists Debbie Bookchin and Jim Shoemaker finally documented the same public health disaster in the details which it deserves, including interviews with many of the scientists involved. And the 2004 title speaks for itself: The Virus and the Vaccine, the true story of the cancer-causing monkey virus contaminated polio vaccine and the millions of Americans exposed. Bernice Eddy obviously thought of the possibility of an upcoming epidemic of viral cancer was real. Why else would she have risked her career and her pension by announcing her findings to the medical community without NIH's knowledge? Did she fear that political interests at NIH would bury her warning like they did when she sent them photos of the monkeys paralyzed by Salk's vaccine? Or was she just concerned that the glacially slow gears of the bureaucratic science would not move fast enough to produce a solution in time? It may already have been too late. The viral damage to the genetic structure of the cell may take place very early in the infection. In 1959, Ed explained it this way: It well, it will be, it may well be that the virus starts the cancerous process, but by the time we detect the tumor, there was very little virus left and an altered form that we cannot detect it. In 1995, it was explained this way: if the growth controlling RAS gene is somehow damaged, it may become stuck on the on position. Either way, there is no possible political benefit to be gained from telling the public about Eddy's forecasted epidemic of cancer unless a vaccine could be developed in time to prevent it. The issue was speed. Developing a vaccine against the spectrum of cancer-causing monkey viruses already inoculated to millions of people, and the polio vaccine was at best a long shot. But there was some evidence that anti-cancer vaccines were possible. Quoting Time magazine, Stewart and Eddy have gone a vital step further. They made a vaccine that protects a majority of the susceptible animals against polyoma virus's effect. The odds of success were slim, but the stakes were enormous. Millions of Americans with cancer. They had to do something. They had to try, and they might get lucky. They might have serendipity. In a word, they were desperate. Eddy may have underestimated the government, or she may have understood them better than any of us. Either way, it looks as if the government did spring into action, at least by bureaucratic standards, but the statistics suggest that they failed to produce a solution in time. If a vaccine were developed in time to prevent an epidemic cancer in America, the research would need to be done quickly, quietly, and privately, and it would have been directed by a competent professional, someone with courage, someone with resources, someone with the reason, someone willing to take a risk. Perhaps then the vaccine might arrive in time to prevent a horrible and unprecedented wave of cancer among the American people. If they succeeded, they would be national heroes, praised by the press, welcomed by a grateful public, rewarded financially and socially for demonstrating that our beloved can-do spirit of privateering really is an innate American asset, capable of triumphing even in mysterious realms of science. If it did not, at least participants would have publicly stuck their necks out. Ferry and the angry Cuban exiles may have been willing to develop a biological weapon to kill Castro, but I personally had not thought that Dr. Mary Sherman or the other doctors would have knowingly been party to the secret development of a biological weapon. I did, however, think that she might have been willing to be part of a covert effort to prevent an epidemic of cancer, especially the competent cancer researchers who she knew personally and trusted thought it were possible. Let me see. I wonder if I want to do this. Hold on, y'all. I want to see if I can get this. Mm. Hold on one second. Hold on one second. I want to see something. Hold on one second. There's a certain thing I want to look for. There's a particular doctor. Let me see if I can find this. There's a little piece in here I want to find, and I might stop in a second. All of a sudden, my eyes are getting tired. And if not, I'll find it. And I'll pick back up. I want to find South America. Let me look for Chile. Let me see if I can find Latin America. I want to look for communism. Hold on one second. 3:30. Uh-oh. Ah, Oshner. Okay, I got the part I want. I'm going to read a little bit more. I'm going to stop because my eyes are all of a sudden getting tired. And looking at this screen is kind of, how bright is this thing? Oh, that's better. Whew. This thing's kicking my eyes in the behind. Okay. I was going somewhere. I just want to read something. I would switch chapters because it doesn't have that chapter sort of just says to you, hey y'all, vaccines resulted in a lot of people getting possibly cancer. I want to read something to you. Oh yes. So we did cancer. I'm skipping to chapter 12. And what's the other chapter? And chapter 13. I'm going to read a little bit more. I'm going to stop because my eyes are kicking me in the behind. I can pick this up in a couple hours. If you fall asleep and I fall asleep, that's cool. I'm going to fold this page because I know what I'm talking about. Forgive me. How many of y'all dig what I'm trying to tell you about this polio? Come on, y'all, respond to me. Who out here gets what I'm trying to say tonight? And this is all connected to eugenics and all of this stuff is going on right now. Okay. All together. All right. Now, let me tell you what's up. I'm going to go to chapter 12 in Dr. Mary's Monkey. This is chapter 12. This is the chapter called The Other Epidemic. That Other Epidemic. As we enter the 20th century, a new plague stalked our planet. The official projections from the World Health Organization predicted by the millennium 30 million people would be infected with this new virus. Other experts put the number over 100 million. According to the Joint UN Program on HIV/AIDS, the actual number was 30,400,000. 18 million of them had succumbed to the disease. The damage would be the worst in the third world, where the population and poverty are the highest and where the education and sanitation are the lowest. But the plague knows no borders, and in time it will likely infect every city in the world. And the World Health Organization spokesperson. It is the worst public health disaster ever, beyond anything in our comprehension. This is what they're saying about corona right now. Most articles published in the American press about where AIDS came from concentrate on the spread of the virus. The theories published in the United States tend to say that AIDS came from either Haiti or Africa. In Haiti, they prefer they prefer to say it came from the U.S. or Africa, and in Africa, they'd rather say it came from the U.S. or Haiti. And many people have heard about the homosexual Canadian flight attendant where promiscuous activities helped spread the virus in the late 70s and early 80s. The flight attendant story has an interesting example. It shows how fast sexually transmitted disease can travel over great distances and how a slow bureaucracy can be about responding to something that it does not want to see. So when I ask Americans where AIDS came from, most of them say Africa. This is primarily due to publicity about the huge number of HIV-1 cases in Zaire and Central Africa, and about the relationship between the AIDS virus and the African monkey virus, and about the discovery of HIV-2 in Senegal on the western coast of Africa. But remember, Dr. Robert Bigger of the National Institute of Health said, there's no conclusive evidence that the AIDS virus originated in Africa, since the epidemic seemed to start approximately at the same time as in America and Europe. It is interesting to note that in 1985, after 4 years of tracking AIDS globally, there were 9,000 cases in America, only 2,000 in Africa, Europe, Australia, Haiti, and Asia combined. Most of the efforts to tie the origin of the AIDS epidemic to Africa are based upon efforts to tie Kaposi sarcoma to AIDS. While Kaposi is one of the cancers which frequently accompanies HIV infections, AIDS and Kaposi are separate diseases. Kaposi has been recognized as a distinct disease and studied as such since the 1800s. HIV is new. As Robert Bigger titled in his article, Kaposi sarcoma in Zaire is not associated with AIDS infection. It is interesting to note that in 1983, before Zaire exploded with HIV-1, before the relationship with SIV was discovered, and before HIV-2 was found in Senegal, a researcher named Jane Tees at the Harvard School of Public Health published a theory which suggested that AIDS was caused by a mutation of African swine flu viruses, to which the Cuban pig population had been intentionally exposed as an act of political sabotage, and which then spread casually from Cuba to the nearby island of Haiti, where it reached an epidemic proportions and tolerated in a prostitution environment. Let me stop for 1 second to remind you, in Plague Wars the other day I read for you that they were working on swine flu, the CIA in the United States. Who's been trying to take down Cuba since 1959? Who's done biological warfare, assassination, economic warfare, and blockaded? The CIA. Who's been holding up the dictatorships in Haiti? The CIA. I was talking about Haitian pigs the other day. Go back and check. So it's interesting. The pigs in Haiti and Cuba, two countries with the CIA has had issues with the governments of trying to control people. They get this. What did Cuba do? Cuba sent soldiers to fight against apartheid in the late 70s and early 80s. If people there were exposed to this virus, and that would explain how it could have gotten to Congo, how it would be in southern Africa, because of the presence of people exposed to it from someplace else. It's just a thought. Let me keep going. When the monkey virus connection was announced, the pig theory evaporated quickly because the pig was wrong and does not mean Cuba to Haiti was wrong. What the epidemiological evidence did, this researcher from the Harvard School of Public Health have for saying that AIDS spread from Cuba to Haiti. This is an area that needs to be explored further. It is important to note that we have virtually no public health information from Cuba during the 1960s or 70s, and if we did have it, we would probably not believe it anyway. After all, the communists have always said AIDS came from an American lab. But it was a French epidemiologist who suggested the spread of AIDS between the Caribbean and Africa may be the result of Cuban military airlift during the 1970s from the Caribbean to the U.S. via Cuban exile boat lift in the 1970s. What is known about AIDS in the Caribbean is that HIV case ones reported very early in Haiti. One in particular, a French engineer, received a blood transfusion after he lost an arm in an automobile accident in 1977. Back in France, he developed AIDS and died. This is pretty conclusive evidence that HIV existed in the Haitian blood supply around the mid-1970s. AIDS was not reported in the United States until 1971, but there was something called GRID, gay-related something, GRID. These people have a bias. Further, highly respected American scientist Matilda Krem, the American Foundation for AIDS Research, suggested that a sudden massive outbreak of AIDS among American homosexual males might have been due to affected batches of gamma globin, an immune system booster commonly given to third world travelers, and a health fad in the American gay community at the time, which were made from tainted human blood brought in the Caribbean during the 1970s. In order to be considered a possible creator of HIV-1, one would have to possess both the capability of mutating a monkey virus and the opportunity to do so within an established time frame. You know that they could not do that in Haiti or anywhere in Africa. I want to skip something. I want to read a piece of this. I'm going to keep going. Doctor, listen to this. The Ferry Sherman Underground Medical Laboratory started with the noble and patriotic mission of preventing an epidemic of cancer in America. But once the work started, once the power to move cancer from animal to animal was established, once the ability to change viruses genetically was demonstrated, once the more virulent viral strains were isolated, once the means of transmission were established, once Dr. Mary Sherman died, once Guy Bannister, these are people that tried to kill Kennedy, then the laboratory and the animals and the viruses were left in the hands of David Ferry. He's the pervert, if you've seen the JFK movie, a pervert pedophile. He could have easily perverted the lab's resources into a biological weapon if he had wished to do so, picking up the most virulent strains and delivering them to a target deep in the heart of the Caribbean. From Ferry's racist perspective, Haiti was a blister in the Caribbean, breeding niggers and shedding them from their primitive paganism into the waters off the coast of America. Its neighbor Cuba was worse, a fortified stronghold of godless communists, poised to spring upon the weak neighbors with Russian weapons of war and enslave them in brutal captivity. Worse still, Cuba was the lair of treacherous Fidel Castro, for whom Ferry had held a personal hatred. If there was ever a case for putting a destructive instrument in the hands of a dangerous man, this was it. Given his history of violent political activities and his record of mental instability, the question is disturbing. What would David Ferry do if he realized he held the power to change? He had the power to change history. Okay? All right, I want to get one more part here. I'm going to read one more part and I'm going to stop for a second because my eyes are like killing me. Where is this thing? Okay, I'm just going to read a little bit of this. This is on page 324. I'm going to read 2 pages and stop or go through this. Um, okay. Judith was hoping to develop a knockout punch to rid the world of a communist dictator who had threatened the United States with nuclear missiles. She believed what she was told. She was not told what the project was run by maniacs who may actually have wanted to get rid of the world of its promiscuous, impoverished, and unproductive underclass by perfecting a sexually transmitted disease. Nor was she told that the project might give the mafia and others the covert means to silence inconvenient witnesses as they awaited trial. I have I doubt that Judith would have cooperated with them under these circumstances. But Judith does say that Mary Sherman expressed concerns over the safety of the project to her, and that she also thought that Alton Oshner was overconfident in his belief that he could control who got their hands on his biological weapon. Given the genetically altered monkey viruses were being carried around New Orleans by people like Lee Harvey Oswald and David Ferry, who with conspicuously close contacts with the mafia and who knows what else. The Sherman-Very experiment successfully created aggressive cancers in mice. These new cancers were tested on monkeys. These worked killing monkeys quickly, but there was a missing link. They needed to know if their cancer cocktail would actually kill a human. It was decided to test their concoction on a black prisoner from Louisiana's Angola State Penitentiary who had volunteered for the experiment. They brought him to Jackson State Mental Hospital near Clinton, Louisiana, where he was injected with their new bioweapon and died. Upon discovering the volunteer had no idea what he had signed up for, outraged Judith wrote a letter protesting the use of their product on an unwitting human patient and delivered it to Dr. Osher's secretary. In doing so, she violated the security rules that Osher had demanded, jeopardized his reputation, and forever crossed hordes with one of the most powerful men in American medicine. As a serious tactical error on her part, but Judith was always strong-willed and uncompromising on issues, Dr. Osher was equally strong-willed and uncompromising in his response before slamming the telephone down. You and Lee are expendable. That's Lee Harvey Oswald that this man says is expendable. I want to get something about this. From there, the situation fell apart rapidly. Lee and Judith were released from their cover jobs at Greeley. The game plan had been that Judith and Lee would go to Mexico to work as a CIA informant, but Lee was ordered to return to Dallas. Osher reneged on his offer to place Judith at Tulane Medical School. Judith watched Lee read a newspaper. She drove off with her husband back to Florida. Judith fell deeply in love with Lee Oswald that summer and recounts numerous trysts that they had, ranging in the back of a Volkswagen van parked at the Orleans garage for a suite at the Royal New Orleans Hotel provided by their friend Clay Shaw. Clay Shaw is a homosexual mafia person that helped Kennedy be assassinated. Okay. Let me see, where can I find this? I want to go back and get Osher. I need to understand that this aids. Let me just break this down when I come back to this book. That the CIA and other people were doing, learning how to kill people with viruses in 1960, 61, 62, 63. This Dr. Osher, whose name I need to pull up, Oshner, was a person who hated black people's guts. Really. He really hated black people and truly wanted to wipe black people the These people, when they learned that polio could kill the viruses, many people got excited and took the information from this SV40 and made cancers and other things with the plan to depopulate people like you and me. This is a book that doesn't put all the pieces together. It's written by a white dude who's racist, but it's acknowledged that there were people saying we can use this cancer killing our people, our young whites. We can make this and kill black people or anybody we want to kill. This saying, these are Nazis. This guy was a Nazi. Oshner, and I'll read more on him from this book, but my eyes are hurting. Oshner was a Nazi sympathizer doctor who worked with Nazis in South America, hated communism, and hated blacks and others. These folks saw the opportunity to take cancers from animals and put them in people as a way to kill off populations of unwanted people. This is what a significant part of our medical establishment and our scientific, it's all about killing people. It's not about making life better. I'm just saying this to warn you. You can do whatever you want. You can blow me off, but there's punishment out there. I'm going to take a couple hour break and then I'll get back with y'all. And I think we put in a good 2 hours up in here. And man, I still got my books on feminism. I still have my books on asymmetrical warfare and genocide. We can absolutely do this. I'm sorry that my eyes, I've been doing this about 6 hours. My eyes don't like, and I had the setting on my computer too high. So it's kicked my eyes in the behind. So what I want to do, I want to thank all of you. What's 131 people? It's 3 a.m. If y'all want to pick this back up in a couple hours, y'all get some rest. If you don't, just look for it. I will be posting. I've got more books on racism, sex. I think I'm going to just go through Dr. Osher, but this is Dr. Mary's Monkey. It's a pretty cheap book. It talks about how the people, Lee Harvey Oswald, worked with the CIA. I know you've heard all this before, but the thing that got me is that they were working on cancers. Lee Harvey Oswald was doing cancer research to figure out how to kill black people and to kill Cubans and kill Castro. And then this became the AIDS thing, I believe, that's used to kill us. Now, if y'all like this, I still want to get some more books. Not only give me likes, I want to thank the almost 2,600 members that we have. And God, I still have more books. I need to do another 4 or 5 hour thing. Drop me a piece. It doesn't have to be more than $1, but if enough people drop $2, there are a couple more books I want to get. There's some Harold Cruz. I want to start doing, once I get through with some of this, we can start doing black stuff, more black things. I want to. And so hook me up. You know how to do this. I'm Dr. Randy Short, DrRandyShort on the PayPal. Of course, I'm on Zelle and, I'm sorry, Cash App is Dr. Randy Short. I'm on Zelle and PayPal. It's wrandyshort at gmail. Drop me a message. Write me. In fact, I'm looking for other guests. You're going to see a whole lot of stuff. God, I wish my eyes weren't giving out because I'm not tired. So if I should lay down and I pop back up, then I don't have to hang around. I'll just put another thing out because we need to get this out and over. But I want to thank everybody. We've had 125,000 views. And that's with my very crude hookup. I'm sorry about the signal being off. I'm trying. I mean, damn. I buy new stuff. Anyway, I will be back. I want to talk about weaponized anthropology, race and sex, feminism, eugenics, communism, We're coming back at you. So let me stop here. Has anyone got any questions? And by the way, I want to thank you. I got this book. I got the Sissy book. I'm gonna come back and talk about this. Is uh, man, I should. I got stacks of these things. So we're gonna continue. Okay. Love to Philly. Love to everybody out there, England, so forth. Check this out, rewind it, and forgive me. This has been a difficult time. Stuff cutting off, stuff not working. Let's hope that tomorrow the signals are better and more books. But at least we got through a couple books today. A couple. All right. My Cash App is Dr. Randy, RandyShort. Uh, Dr. Randy Short. So capital D, lowercase r, uppercase R, ANDY, uppercase SHORT. So yeah, drop me a piece or two. I got a couple of other books. As it says, I'm saving up. And I got this book here. Damn, this is crazy. I'm going to go back to this and just look at the occult, the Nazis, the sex stuff. You start to see the sex, atheism, baby killing, hatred, all this stuff is interconnected, and eugenics. And we black people seem to always be the one. There's something about us that make everybody want to screw with us. And I think it's divine. We just don't see it in ourselves. So MFM, everybody, when you now hear that this AIDS is probably created as a government program, it's even more reason for all of us that lost someone to AIDS. I don't care if they're gay. I want to get paid for that too. As a survivor, you know what I'm saying? So please subscribe to the channel, which is Randy Short on YouTube. I have a Randy Lancaster Short channel. Subscribe over there if you want to. I need it. Just in case they shut me on one, I can pop up another one. It's the same way I've got multiple Facebook pages, because all of a sudden someday they decide to shut you down. We'll be working towards other ways to communicate. Hi, Anissa in Jackson, Mississippi. So I don't know. I'm getting silly, and I thought it's going to be up for a while. So I don't know. It must be the weather. I'm going to stop here. Man, I got some stuff I got to get into. I can't wait to go back to feminism. Man, and I've got this book here. This is going to be one. It's called The War and the Weak. I'm going to be reading. We're going to go back to the Nazis and killing people. And once you start to see how much folk hate people, things make sense. Certain things begin to make sense of why things are like they are, and for certain people. Okay, Dr. Leonard's. I agree that Dr. Gallo, who worked with Fauci, they're all friends. They're into depopulation. They hate our guts. They're frauds. They're making money and killing people. It's a hustle. The love of money is the root of all evil, the scriptures say. I agree with him. Patrick Weaker. I don't know who Patrick Weaker is. I'm sorry. I've never heard of him. I'm very sorry. Sometimes I don't have the answers. I know some things. I know a little bit. So, y'all can kick me off, but I thank everybody. Patrick Weaver. I still don't know who you're making reference to. Sometimes I don't know what people are talking about. If I don't know, I'm being honest. I don't fake to be a know-all person. So I don't know Patrick Weaver. You'll have to give me a context. In fact, this print is so small. I'm gonna check out because I feel like I'm gonna fall over. We'll get back together very soon, maybe 4 or 5 hours. MFM, everybody, don't get vacked up. These are sources you can go check. I always tell you where you can find what it is I'm talking to you about. Okay. Um, is Patrick Weaver? Did something happen to Patrick Weaver? Wait. Patrick Weaver? You said Patrick Weaver killed himself? Stop for a minute. I just called Patrick. Talk to me. Someone talk to me about Patrick Weaver, please. Please. Oh my, I'm sorry. Now I know who you're talking about. Yeah, he never likes for people to talk about his name. I called Patrick several times this week and he has not called me back. No, I don't think that you're kidding. I don't think that you're kidding if in fact it's so. I am so sorry if Patrick is deceased. Can you get me something documented? I am so sorry. I've been tweeting Patrick all day today and yesterday. Been writing to Patrick, reaching out to Patrick. Uh, I'm very sorry if that's the case. Check his Facebook. I believe it was 12/22. I've been trying to reach him. We talked. Um, oh my God, that's so awful. Oh my God. Um, it's been a couple of weeks since I talked to Patrick. I asked Patrick to call me. I prayed with Patrick. Um, I'm so sorry. If let me see, can someone send me something on this? I did not know that this happened. I've been calling Patrick and no responses, nothing. I'm trying to think, why doesn't he call me back? How come I can't get him? Oh man, I need to know. I tell you what I will do. What I will do, if you can prove that Patrick's, can you email me a screenshot? Let me take this thing off. Let me let you go, Mr. Jefferson. You be blessed. I need to see this for myself. Hold on one second. No, you're not interrupting the program. You're not interrupting the program. I was going to stop. Gavin, I need you to send me an email. Anybody that wants to, you can send me an email at what's this thing here? Uh, hold on one second. Wow, I'm trying to think what the email. Uh, can you send me an email at wrandyshort at gmail? Can you send that via email? I have been thinking about him like the last couple of days, trying to figure out why he doesn't talk to me with friends. I mean, I don't know what's going on. Oh, I'm very sorry about that. Uh, y- let's see, I've got this screen up here. Um, can somebody get me something on Patrick Weaver, please? I did not know Patrick Weaver was if that's I didn't know that. I absolutely okay, y'all. Let me see if I can find Patrick Weaver. This thing is like not okay. This thing ain't working now. Let me get up off of here. Yeah, that's not good news. They're saying a friend of mine is dead. Um, hmm. Help me, Lord. That's awful. That's awful. Okay. Um, let me stop here, y'all. I really need to put my head back now. Okay. Uh, I'll see you in a little bit.